Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host, Omar Khalid. But today is the 2nd of March 2022. These are the stories that we will be talking about during the course of the show. We will begin, ladies and gentlemen, with the latest situation as far as Palestine is concerned. 3 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli forces in 2 different incidents in the occupied West Bank. Not the first incident that has happened. We've also heard and listened to hair-raising incidents in which teenagers have been killed, in which other people from Palestine have been killed. And this is a continuous spate of violent incidents that has been plaguing Palestine not since now but since decades. What needs to be done? The Palestinians, from the Pakistani side also, we've been highlighting this issue on different important fora. What is the world's responsibility as far as Palestine is concerned? This is going to be our first segment. Our second story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns the step in the right direction that has been taken by the World Bank, that is going to back using $1 billion in frozen Afghan funds for aid for the Afghan people. It is pertinent that the people in Afghanistan get this aid at the right time and at the earliest, so that the number of people that are being affected by the current cold, by the current starvation decreases, and the situation in which Afghanistan currently finds itself kind of comes back to an original situation in which the people can live in a somehow peaceful condition. This is going to be our second story. Our third story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns Pakistan and India that have begun talks. These are the 3 days of crucial talks at the Permanent Commission of Indus Waters level on a 6-point agenda, and it includes different projects, hydropower projects on the Chenab River, as well as other projects in Ladakh. This is an important meeting between the 2 sides because, of course, water is an extremely important issue for both the countries. Then, ladies and gentlemen, finally we'll be talking about a group of Indian Sikh pilgrims who have planted olive saplings to mark the launch of a tree planting campaign at Kartarpur. Not only do we revere our Sikh community and the Sikh community that comes through the Kartarpur corridor during different times of the year and also during important Sikh festivals, but also the fact that the Sikh community participates in the sapling planting ceremony also shows the devotion that the Sikh community has, and whether it be from Pakistan or India, towards Pakistan Clean and Green program. This is going to be our last story. Let's begin with our first segment, ladies and gentlemen, and that concerns Palestine, the latest issues that confront. And these are not latest issues, but a continuation of the barbarities and brutalities that the Israelis have been committing on the Palestinians. More in the following report.
Israeli occupation forces are resorting to excessive use of force against Palestinians in their bid to escalate eviction drive for illegal settlements. According to Palestinian Health Ministry, 3 Palestinians were martyred by Israeli forces. The forces have mercilessly hit a Palestinian girl with a stun grenade. Palestinian official news agency Wafa confirmed that Israeli forces overnight gunned down 2 Palestinians and injured another one in northern West Bank refugee camp. In an Amnesty International report on Israel's apartheid against Palestine, underlines almost all of Israel's civilian administration, military authorities, and governmental institutions are involved in enforcement of a system of apartheid against Palestinians. At high-level segment of 49th regular session of Human Rights Council, Foreign Minister of Palestine, Dr. Riyad Malki calls for Human Rights Council to take action against Israeli illegal activities in Palestine. Briefing Security Council, UN Special Coordinator for Middle East Peace Process, Tor Wennesland underlined the need for firm action in order for Israel-Palestine to re-engage in meaningful negotiations, and there is no substitute for a legitimate political process that will resolve the core issues driving the conflict. Israeli right groups revealed that it has recorded 77 Palestinian deaths at the hands of Israeli forces in West Bank last year. Israeli authorities enforcing a system of oppression and domination against Palestinians, and silence of international community is baffling.
Now, to discuss the situation in Palestine and how the barbarities continue, not since now, since decades, what needs to be done, we've been joined by Mr. Nader Alturk, who's a counselor and the deputy head of mission at the Embassy of the State of Palestine. Excellency, thank you very much to have joined us.
To speak to my brother and sister for your channel.
All right. Excellency, I wanted to ask you, as far as this continuous spate of killings is concerned by the Israeli authorities on the Palestinians, when we see an almost daily incident of what is happening in the West Bank, and we've seen what happened in May last year as well, why, in your point of view, is the West not reacting the way it should, and why do you feel that Israel has such a hold over the West?
The main problem, dear brother, is the double standard. When you are speaking about the principles of international law, principles of human rights, principles of freedom, justice, it needs to be principles for all, not selected for someone and not for not someone or not. The problem is that there is double standards, double understanding, double reactions about who is making the criminal actions and who is the victim. According to that, Israel feel safe from punishment from the international society, from the international bodies, because they are feeling they are above the law. No one going to punish them for their criminal actions against the Palestinian people. This is
All
the
right,
main
excellent.
problem which need to be solved to getting peace and stability in our world.
All right, Excellency, the fact remains that the Palestinians want their land, want the rights, their due rights that they had over their lands. But since the last few decades, those rights are continuously being denied to them. On top of that, the brutalities that continue, the people that are killed, the people that are jailed in the name of whatever freedom of expression, of freedom of rights, or the denial of that for that respect. How many fora do you feel are the right ones that the world or countries like yourself or ourselves need to go to or adhere to, or refer to, in order to bring some kind of a solution to it? Or do you feel that there is some kind of a light at the end of the tunnel?
I like to remind or putting some highlight about small issues. According to what happened since 1948 until now, since the establishment of Israel in our homeland, we got about 700 resolutions from the United Nations Summit Assembly, and we getting about 80, more than 80 resolution from the Security Council of United Nations. But none of it are in progress on the ground until now. Even to remark something that according to 181 resolution was by the United Nation, which giving the birth certificate for Israel as a state on our Palestinian land, about 55% of our homeland, giving birth only for one state and forgetting giving the birth certificate for the Palestinian state, which is we are right now asking and defending our rights to establishing our independent state, to have peace, stability for our own people in their own homeland, which we are living there since more than 10,000 years.
All right, Excellency,
So,
you see
so
that
what we
it is
see,
Israelis, Excellency, you see the
just to
Israelis that
remind
are
something,
occupying the lands of the
during
Palestinians, and we see a continuous spate of this occupation that is increasing. More and more land of the Palestinians that belongs to the Palestinians is being occupied by the Israelis. You talked about the many resolutions that are there in the United Nations as we speak, not since now, but since 1948, since this whole incident began. And in the last few decades, it has gained momentum. Despite all these different resolutions, Israel continues to not only occupy the Palestinian land, but continue their barbarities on the Palestinians. Why is the United Nations silent?
Again and again, it is the main problem is double standard, but the double understanding of the principle of international law, double reactions. As example, we see when right now what happened in Ukraine, which we hope so this conflict going to be finished soon in peaceful way. We see how much how many international meeting happened, what kind of punishment taking against Russia, and what happened in Gaza last few months ago. It was more than this because it was attacking a civilian people in Gaza, not armed people. And with that, we didn't see anyone take Israel out of the SWIFT system, taking any punishment according to their banks, their leadership, their settlers, or anything, which means that in other world, we have speech in Arabic that who feels safe from punishment, he will behave bad. According to that, Israel, since it was established in 1948 until now on the stolen land of the Palestinian people, they are acting in the same way. It was establishing on the bodies and blood of the Palestinian people and keep on to keep alive in this world. She need to be day by day more criminal, more apartheid, more aggressive against the Palestinian people, and no one asking for punishment, make any kind of punishment against Israel. And if you are speak about punishment of Israel, you become speaking, you are anti-Semitism, which is unbelievable, and it needs to be solved by making more lobbying, more actions by Muslim Ummah countries, by all the countries are love peace, stability, and justice to punish Israel for their criminal actions against the Palestinian and against their neighborhood.
All right. Now, when you see all of this spate of negativity or the spate of, these incidents that are happening since the last decades, and of late also we know that the Palestinian minister Riyad Maliki also spoke at a high level segment of the 49th regular session of the Human Rights Council at the United Nations. Do you feel all that he highlighted, that you've also highlighted right now as far as the plight of the Palestinian people, rings, some kind of a positive effect on all the participants of such meetings, or do you feel that more needs to be done? And if you feel that more needs to be done, what, in your point of view, needs to be done?
Actually, we are feeling good that the international society, international media start changing in the favor of Palestine. That starts since long time, since the Intifada in 1987, and continued and was more clear during the attack on Gaza by the Israelis criminal army in last year in middle of May. We need to cooperate with our Muslim countries like Pakistan, Turkey, Arab countries like Egypt, Jordan, Sudan, and all the world to make all this resolution which was taken against Israel in favor of Palestine to be seen on the ground. We need to see Israel to be punished by the international society. No one above the law. All countries, all nations are equal. Pakistani, like Palestinians, like Americans, like British, like Ukrainians, like Russians, all we are equal. All of us are the grandsons and daughters of Adam and Eve. No one is better than other. This is the principle of human rights, which need to be seen as soon as possible on the ground, not selected for this nation and this nation not, this white people, this black people. This is not the right things. All of us are brother and sister in humanity. All of us are the grandsons and daughters of Adam and Eve. So we need to cooperate together to make our world more peaceful, more stability, more bridges for development, and to cooperate together to make better future for our new generations. Or we're going to get more and more conflicts and going to make more and more victims, and this will never give peace for our people or the people of the world.
All right. What I wanted to also highlight, Excellency, is the fact that Israel, on the one hand, is going on with such atrocities as far as Palestine is concerned, or the Palestinian territory. But on the other hand, it is the first one that talks about the atrocities that were committed after the Second World War on their community. Don't you feel there is a certain hypocrisy or duplicity as far as Israel is concerned? Because in fact, it is doing exactly what happened to them after the Second World War.
This is very important questions, but when you are establishing a state on a stolen country, because they came as refugees for the Palestinian, people, and we accept them and host them, take care of them, when many of the European countries and other countries didn't accept them. But they come to us by support of the colonialism to establishing their own state on our homeland. So they was a victim, right now they are a criminal, using aggressive and tools which stronger than the Nazi, and they are using the technique of lie until people believe you, and keep lying until you believe yourself. So they are believing themselves that they have the right to kill the Palestinian people without punishment. They have the right to be the criminal in the face of looking like a victim. Again and again, we need more actions. We need to cooperate together to do something for that. And I don't like to go to psychology and speak about psychology fraud or something. Sometimes the victim become a criminal because he was a victim one day before. I think this is one thing. But on the other hand, Israel was establishing, according to a lie, that 3,000 years they was there. But we are there since 10,000 years, and we didn't get support. They're getting a support to establishing a state on the land of Palestine, but we didn't get the right to establishing our own independent state of our homeland, which need to, again and again, we need to change the double standards. Principle of international law, principle of human rights, it is once for all, not only for some people or some people not.
All right. Also, how do you view, Excellency, the role that Pakistan has been playing? We saw the tweet that our Minister for Human Rights, Shri Mazari, also posted very recently, in which she talked about also the duplicity of the West when comparing the way they are reacting towards the Ukraine crisis versus how they are not reacting towards what is happening in Palestine and Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. How important do you feel is the backing, is the friendship, is the collaboration that is happening as far as Pakistan is concerned towards the cause of the Palestinian people?
Actually, we appreciate the position of Pakistan and their stand-up with Palestinian people, Palestinian case. We are keeping cooperate together. We are speaking, our leadership have a continuous speaking and cooperate with our Pakistani brothers' leadership. The position of Pakistan all the time is supporting Palestinian people. They never turn their back for us. They're always with us. They always speak about Palestine like they are speaking about Pakistani issues and problems. They always speak in the international organization about Palestine, United Nations, anywhere, any meeting, any conference, they always support Palestine. We appreciate that, and we hope one day we have the opportunity to host our brother and sister Pakistani people in Palestine. We have the ability to pray together in the independence capital of Palestine, Al-Quds, in Al-Aqsa Masjid. And I hope that all this hard work which happened by the Pakistani people, Pakistani government, Pakistani leadership to support Palestine will be getting the results which we are hoping at, which is establishing of getting the freedom of Palestine and establishing our own independent state of our homeland, which we have it and own it since 10,000 years. And inshallah, very soon we're going to pray together in Aqsa Masjid when it is independence. And as a Palestinian here, I feel like I'm not a foreigner. And as a Pakistani, when you are in Palestine, we will never feel as a foreigner. You are one of us, like we are one of you.
These are great words indeed, Excellency. Now, last month, around the 18th, the decision was taken by the United Nations Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination to set up an ad hoc conciliation commission to report on Israel's continued and gross violations of the convention and its provisions. Do you feel this is going to have some kind of an effect on the Palestinian people, on their due rights?
We are optimistic. We are full of hope that when the international community, international society, all the countries cooperate to have the principles of human rights, international law to deal with all nations, where all people are equal according to the principle of human rights, then we will see all this kind of resolution going to be appear and seen on the ground. As I said before, we have more than 700 resolutions from United Nations, more than 80 resolutions from Security Council of United Nations, but Israel ignores all of that because Israel feels it is safe from punishment. So if there is no campaign to punish Israel, all this good resolution will not be appear and seen on the ground. So what we are waiting for it is campaign against Israel to follow the procedure of justice, follow the principle of human rights, the principle of international law. Before that, all this resolution is good, but is not enough.
All right. Excellency, we've talked about the United Nations, but there are other important organizations as well. There is the SCO, there is the ASEAN, there are other organizations as well. Do you feel that those organizations could maybe come together as one? They are, of course, the IOC as well. Do you feel that these, the OIC, do you feel that these organizations could come together as well as far as the cause of the Palestinian people is concerned, have a joint stance and maybe translate all the different resolutions and agreements that have been made into action?
All of this organization are important. When I speak about campaign against Israel to follow the international laws and international resolutions, I keep in mind all this organization to cooperate together, united together, to make this world better for the new generations. Without cooperate together, we will never getting stability and peace in our world. So according to that, all this organization need to put hand by hand to make equal nations, equal people, follow the principle of human rights, because right now we have a heavy responsibility over our shoulders to give peace and stability for the next generations. Conflict, we have many conflicts in our life, a lot of conflict in our age, so we need to finish all of that to getting better life for the next generations. But with countries, apartheid and the criminal countries with Israel, this goal is not easy to reach. So we need to cooperate together to put this kind of illegal countries, criminal countries, apartheid systems like Israel to be punished, like the international society try to punish other countries when they make any actions they don't like it. Or we will never get peace and stability in our world.
All right, Excellency, thank you so very much to have joined us and to have talked to us about the Palestinian perspective of this issue that is plaguing the people of Palestine, not since now, but as you yourself said, since 1948, and since 1967, it has kind of become aggravated, and the way the Palestinians are subjugated to torture, the way they are being denied their due rights, the way their land is being taken by them, it is high time that the world realizes that before it's way too late, that they need to treat the issue of Palestine in the same vein as they treat other issues, that they get together as one for. Palestine is an issue that needs to be dealt with on a first come basis as far as world issues is concerned, and we really hope that countries such as Pakistan and the efforts that we have been making in this very direction will bear fruit along with all the efforts that the government of Palestine is making. Thank you very much, sir, to have joined us. That was Nader Alturk Counselor and Deputy Head of Mission of the Embassy of the State of Palestine, joining us live to talk to us about the Palestinian issue and the barbarities that are being committed by the Israeli people on the hapless Palestinians. Let's come to our second story, ladies and gentlemen, and that concerns Afghanistan, the Afghanistan humanitarian crisis, the Afghanistan economic crisis, and maybe a step in the right direction. Although there have been many pledges as far as the aid to Afghanistan is concerned, there's another pledge that adds to it, and that is the World Bank that has backed using $1 billion in frozen Afghan funds for aid for the people of Afghanistan. More in the following report.
Afghanistan's population is facing chronic food shortages and mounting poverty as country plunges into economic meltdown followed by crippling US sanctions. There have been multiple media reports of desperate, debt-ridden Afghans willing to sell their kidneys in order to feed their families. Sensing the gravity of situation, World Bank has announced more than $1 billion in humanitarian aid for Afghanistan, approving reallocation from Afghanistan Reconstruction Trust Fund. It is the largest source of development funding for Afghanistan, is a multi-donor fund that coordinates international aid to improve the lives of millions of Afghans, and it is administered by World Bank on the behalf of donor partners. Washington-based lender further stated that funds to be delivered in the forms of grants aim to support the delivery of essential basic services, protect vulnerable Afghans, help preserve human capital, and key economic and social services. According to UN, more than half of the country's 38 million population suffers from acute hunger, with nearly 9 million Afghans at the risk of famine. Earlier, American President Joe Biden decided to withhold about $7 billion in Afghan assets, repurposing half of the money as compensation for the victims of 9/11. Unfortunately, international community is not doing enough to prevent ongoing humanitarian catastrophe in war-ravaged country.
To talk more about this issue, we've been joined by Dr. Farah Naz. She's an assistant professor at Nust and also a foreign affairs expert. Dr. Saiba, thank you very much to have joined us. Dr. Saiba, when we see this latest pledge that has been made by the World Bank as far as the $1 billion are concerned, that of course belong to the Afghans, but they have said that this money is going to be expedited to the Afghan people. What do you make of it? Are you optimistic that the money is going to reach in time, or do you have your doubts?
I think they have already set several conditions that the money is going to be in the Central Bank of Afghanistan, and I think the President Joe Biden administration has set certain kind of rules that it has to be distributed through accredited representatives to the United States. So who is going to decide these accredited representatives? If it is United
States, that's a huge question mark, isn't it?
Yes, it is. So who is going to decide who is going to be the accredited representatives to the United States? If it is America, then of course it's a cherry-picking exercise, and to all those people and societies that America think are worthy of receiving these funds, they will be distributing them. But overall, I don't think so it's going to reach out to the larger Afghan population. And here are certain, I think this decision is also not coming up all of a sudden. There are several surveys and reports coming into place where the United Nations and its various organizations, they are sharing their reports that by the end of this year, 90% of the Afghan population is going to be below poverty line. And they're also stating that 95% of the households with insufficient food consumption and food insecurity is going to prevail there in Afghanistan. 55% of population is expected to be in crisis and food insecurity. So I think it's like a candy that there's a sort of candy that the United States is providing to the United Nations, that we are aware of, that the larger or bulk of the Afghan population is going to be affected with the crisis and the food insecurity. So we will try to overcome all those barriers. So this amount of fund is going to be delivered. But the huge question mark they left behind is accredited representatives, which is undecisive thing. And I think,
but let's talk about these accredited services or the NGOs that the bank says or the US says that it's going to transfer the money through. A, it does not trust the Afghan Taliban government. This is what comes out of this statement. And B, which are these NGOs and how credible are they as well for the timely dispersion of money and aid to the Afghan people?
If you remember in my initial interviews regarding Afghan situation and the rising food insecurity and security, overall insecurity situation, I was pointing out that this humanitarian crisis is not an organic humanitarian crisis, it is a created one. And once it was creating, they had this design that we would create hue and cry in Afghanistan where people is going to be affected. And then we will be like, looks like to me, they're not reliable sources to it, but to me it's like they have already settled it down, they created it, and now they are going to place their own people in Afghanistan, through whom they're going to distribute all these funds to the needy population. So who is going to be those NGOs? I think they're all going to be all those non-governmental organizations who have trust of the United States and the Western countries in general. So if overall the population is going to be affected, I don't think so. Because if we compare the 20 years United States presence in Afghanistan, and if we compare it to the Taliban government since in power, I think it's comparison between 20 to 5-6 months, which is quite difficult and different. If the United States and its NGOs and its reliable and accurate representatives, they were unable to make the life of Afghan people better in 20 years, what can they do now while being away from Afghanistan? I think they are playing with the Afghan people, the children, the women, to whom they show concern. And I was really heartbroken with one of the reports that was coming out from Afghanistan, where parents had to make very impossible choices, where they have to decide that whether they send their children to labor work or they have to let them starve, and which child they have to feed and which one they have to leave starving. And also they have to make some excruciating decisions about that they have to sell their daughters for food. I think this is really a serious situation, and Afghan people need our help and support. It's not the time that America and the Western allies, they kind of exercise their power, that we are powerful, we are important, and you are not. And I think the racism agenda and the way they look down upon Asian people and colored skinned people, I think it's becoming very obvious. The way Ukrainian
this is a very interesting
refugees
point
are
that you have pointed towards, and that is a discrimination of the West as far as the ethnicity of the people who are going through terrible times is concerned. You have all seen the reports that came out from the Western media as far as the Ukrainians are concerned, and how there was a deliberate discrimination between the non-white and the non-white immigrants that were entering Europe. Also, the way the West has united as far as the Ukraine crisis is concerned, but doesn't seem to be taking the same kind of aggressive action when it comes to Afghanistan, also shows a decisive tilt as to their the reasoning and what they want to do and who they want to help. In all of this state of affairs, what needs to be done by those countries that want to genuinely help Afghanistan?
I think there is always a time when people start, realizing the fact that we all were looking up to the West and the superpower of the world, that they will be really treating every state and every individual, irrespective of any racist agenda, irrespective of which color, caste, creed they're holding. But I think their actions have spoken very loudly that if you belong to the white skin and blue eyes community, you will be treated well, irrespective of you have the money in your pocket or not. If you belong to those societies, you will be taken well care of. But if you belong to people with color, I think then you have to think about, and I think it's now the families have to decide right by the birth of their child. If their child is dark skinned, then they have to think what future the child is bringing along, because there is no place, I repeatedly say, there is no place for dark-skinned people in this world, which is highly dominated by the Western countries and the Western forces. I think they need to realize the fact that this game is not going to be sold any further. And I really, my heart bleeds for the Ukrainian people, because I think the consequences of war is really, really draconian. No matter you are light-skinned or dark-skinned, everybody go through the same situation, same problems. But if the outcome has to be treated differently, I think that's more painful. So in these circumstances, I think Afghan people are not only marginalized in the form of that they belong to this part of the world, who is not considered equally important like the rest of the Europe or the Western countries. This bias needs to be shared. And at this situation where the West stands for Ukrainian refugees, Ukraine as a state and its rights and all, it also needs to understand the fact that according to the United Nations reports, there is no shortage of food. Food is short, but people are not starving because of the shortage of food. People are starving because they cannot buy the food from the shops. They don't have the money, and the money has been artificially controlled
But
by
you know,
the
Dr. Farah,
West.
the irony of it all is that the 7 billion US dollars that are currently stuck in the US belong to the Afghan people, plus the money that is in other banks as well across Europe belongs to the Afghan people. Underlining and understanding the situation that the Afghan people are going through, this should have been the first initiative taken by the United States and the other countries to release that aid, and to release it ASAP. We still have to see that aid actually reaching the Afghan people.
But the thing is, Umar, if they were able to understand it, I think then there won't be any problem. As I repeatedly say, it is a man-made crisis. It is not a crisis that the Ukrainian refugees are going through. So in the Afghan situation, it is a part and parcel of the strategy that stopped their funding services. And after that, people going to die, starve. And it's okay for the West if bulk of the Afghan population, children, women, they starve, young girls sell their bodies for food. It's okay for them, but it is not okay for them if it happens in Europe or if it happens in the Western countries. So why crisis in Afghanistan? It is for two main factors. One, the spike in the prices. Secondly, the collapse of the country's banking sector. So both of these factors, they are interlinked. Spike in prices because there is no liquidity of cash in the entire Afghanistan. And then the collapse of the country's banking sector, because what happened is that when funds once the assets were frozen, the Afghanistan central bank, it could completely collapse. So with that, the private sector government and the private sector banking sector is also not able to run its mechanism smoothly because there is no Afghan currency available. So it is all created, and I think the American government is rightly sitting there on the basic nerves, the survival nerves of Afghanistan. If they don't have the money, they cannot do anything. The food is there in the shop, but they cannot buy.
Of course, but of course the money is important, that money that belongs to the Afghan people. What irony, the money in fact that belongs to the Afghan people isn't reaching them in this hour of crisis when they need it the most. The four elements that have been highlighted by the World Bank or by the West as far as where they want to help the Afghan people includes education, health, agriculture sectors and community livelihoods. Should this aid be restricted to these four sectors only?
I don't think so. It belongs to the people of Afghanistan, and Afghan people have all the right over the basic rights, basic facilities. That is, the right of any other individual living in any part of the world. Restricting Afghan people to identify what is important to them in terms of their survival and all, what is important, who is going to spell it out? It's the West who is going to spell out to the people who are never ever considered equally important to the people like the rest of the world. I think this is completely a biased approach, and the world has to realize it, that no more hypocrisy, please. Because when they were here for 20 years, they entirely built the economic infrastructure of Afghanistan based on foreign aid and assistance, because they were aware of the day they want to leave, the entire economic situation will collapse. And exactly the same happened, right? So 75% of the Afghan government economy was completely dependent on foreign aid and assistance. So at this point in time, when they need their own money that belongs to the people of Afghanistan, and someone else is controlling them, and someone else is deciding that how is going to be spent and who is going to spend this money, they will be, of course, sending their representatives through all these NGOs and non-governmental organizations who are going to operate on the larger design of America in the Western powers. I think it's not going to help out the ordinary Afghan people. And the world has to help and support Afghans as they stand for any other individual who is getting affected with war situation in the world.
Now, Dr. Farah, also this approach of giving the aid, whether it be by the World Bank or whether it be by the United States, is to support the delivery of essential basic services, protect vulnerable Afghans, help preserve human capital and key economic and social services. And finally, what it says, and I quote, reduce the need for humanitarian assistance in the future. Does this also mean that the West is putting its hands or clean of Afghanistan after 20 years, after staying 20 years in this country and nothing concrete coming out of it?
Yes, exactly. And as I said that in 20 years of American presence in Afghanistan, what sort of sectors have they developed? They, of course, some segments in the society, it's not the larger Afghan population who were getting benefits of American presence in Afghanistan, where America claimed that they are developing the infrastructure development of the entire Afghan population. But no, very small segment were in a position to achieve all those what America was promising for the Afghan people. But in larger, they build hospitals, they build universities, they build education institutions, but there was no mechanism provided at how they're going to run the system. If there is, for example, if there is a school available, but there are no teaching staff to run the system, I think there is no point in that. So America kind of built all those institutions, but how to run them, how to govern them, how to rule them, these kind of skills were not provided. Same was the logic. They spent a huge amount of money on training the Afghan forces, but end of the day, when they were tested, they were unable to, to rescue their own people. So what is the point of training such people there? I think they have completely wasted the time of Afghan people for the past 20 years, and now they are testing them one more time. Let's see what else we can do with you. We were there to help and support you at the time where we were trying to see which particular segment of the society needs to get benefit of the foreign fundings and everything. I think this is mere hypocrisy that they have done in the past 20 years, and they are doing it even now.
And Dr. Farah, I mean, in all of this crisis situation that Afghanistan is going through, and the way that we clearly and evidently see that when it comes to certain countries that the West is ready to grant aid from the Congress and from the other countries and organizations at the earliest, at the quickest, but when it comes to countries like Afghanistan, there's a deliberate and definite hypocrisy and double-mindedness as to how to deal with countries such as that one. How important does the role become then of the non-Western countries in order to stabilize Afghanistan?
I think it's a responsibility of all countries who share borders with Afghanistan. So I mean the regional countries in particular. They have to see how Afghanistan in this region is treated, because stability and security of Afghanistan has directly impacts and connections with the stability and security of the region. So overall, if we want to stabilize a region, we have to stabilize Afghanistan and its people at large. So at the time when America was here, everybody, and the impression that was provided to the world was that they are really doing an amazing job, where women probably going to be empowered, where there will be the judicial system will be working very well, and the entire government machinery will be working very well. But end of the day, what happened? The world has seen now what America was doing there. So, being an Islamic country, I will always say that it is a huge responsibility and a testing time for all the Islamic countries to come and help support the Afghans and the Afghan government. Because end of the day, if the government is not capable enough and the government is not strong enough to stand for its own people, it can't do anything to defend its people anywhere. So no matter what, if there are internal grievances, if there are regional grievances or international grievances against Taliban and their government, I think the importance at this point in juncture should be given to the Afghan people. Because if they are there, if they survive, if they stay, probably even then Afghanistan will be able to maintain its border and its sovereignty. But if the people are not there, if they die of hunger and they starve and their mates starve, so I think they won't be able to do anything for Afghanistan in general. So in this capacity, I think the regional states first, and then all Islamic countries, they have to come forward and to do something to overcome all these humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan, because they are reaching to alarming levels where it is expected, according to various reports, that 4 out of 5 they're going to be badly affected, and it is also believed that 55% won't be able to survive due to all this starvation and everything.
That is true, Dr. Sahiba, and the entire blame, in my point of view, and I hope that you agree with me as well, will come on these very countries that have been saying that aid will be given to Afghanistan if something more drastic happens to our people in the neighborly country. We need to be extremely vigilant, because this is a human rights crisis. This is a crisis for the people of a country that is going through extremely tough times, and the world needs to really take action before it is way too late and before the blame comes on them. Thank you very much, Dr. Farah Naz, to have joined us.
Thank you very much, Omar. Thank you.
And let's come to our last two stories. The first is the crucial water talks between Pakistan and India. A 6-point agenda is on the table for these 3-day talks that are going on. These are 3 days of crucial water talks. The agenda includes Pakistan's objections to the hydroelectric power of the Tamasha, Kalarus 2 and others. Then both sides are also going to discuss during these 3 days of talks sharing of flood data, program of meetings, and the tours of PICW for the current calendar year. And both sides have also discussed the Kiru hydropower projects. There's a 9-member Indian delegation, and there's a very important Pakistani side that represents WABDA, that represents Pakistan Met Department, Punjab Irrigation, NESPAC, and Foreign Affairs. Now, this is going to be very decisive as far as the future of water distribution between Pakistan and India is concerned. And our last story, ladies and gentlemen, is about the Sikh pilgrims. Our brotherly Sikh pilgrims that come from all over the world at the Kartarpur corridor, at the Panja Sahib, at different other darbars for their religious pilgrimage. What they have done this time is that a group of Sikh pilgrims have planted olive saplings to mark the launch of a tree planting campaign in Kartarpur. We all know about the Clean and Green initiative launched by our Prime Minister, and the current government's resolve to make Pakistan greener with every year. So it is very heartening to see that minorities from other countries such as India, especially the Sikhs, who we revere in high esteem, collaborate and cooperate with Pakistan on this important initiative. With that, we come to an end of today's newsroom. We will see you inshallah tomorrow, same time, same place. Follow the SOPs and get yourselves vaccinated. Allah Hafiz.